Hi, and welcome back to another session at the National Ability Summit. I'm Sandhya Menon. I'll be moderating this panel where we have three experts with wide-ranging experience and a lot of work and a lot of real-life experience in dealing with policy, dealing with mental health, policy dealing with making change. I'd like to introduce myself first. I've been a journalist for a very long time. I've just moved on from active journalism into the communication space. About 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with 2 mental illnesses. I live with them currently. I am active and vocal about mental health and my journey with mental health. I write about my journey, I write about my insights, I write about what I'm doing with myself on a regular basis. I also speak and I'm committed to advocacy for mental health for all. I'd like to briefly bring my panelists on board and I will let them introduce themselves, put them on the spot right in the beginning so that they can best describe the work they do. Our first panelist is Professor Nimesh Desai, who has over 40 years of academic and public service, a career in academia and public service for the last 40 years. He's a psychiatrist, and I'll let Dr. Desai take it from here, and then I'll introduce the other two panelists. Dr. Desai, it's over to you, please.
Thank you. Since your internet is sensible, do you just want a brief introduction or all my remarks at this stage?
Your introduction. We'll get to the remarks in.
I'm a psychiatrist, like you said. In addition to that, I'm a trained and interested public health professional. And besides the so-called top-notch academic institutions that I've worked at, I am lucky to be involved with a lot of ground-level NGOs working on mental health as well as disability. And I am convinced about the multi-stakeholder reality and the better solutions coming forth from that reality for mental health, if not the larger field of health. And so I'm privileged and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Desai. Our next panelist is Dr. Manoj Kumar. He also a psychiatrist who works out of Kerala. He runs a trust called MHAT. I'll have him say a little more about it. It's called the Mental Health Action Trust. Dr. Manoj, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Manoj Kumar. I'm based in Kerala. And for the last 12 years, I've been involved in a community mental health project. The organization is called Mental Health Action Trust, or MHAT. And essentially what we're trying to do is to try to introduce a new model of mental health care where the community and families of people affected are the major stakeholders. The project in many ways is owned, led, and run by the volunteers. So the professionals and a mixture of professionals and non-professional mental health workers who comprise my organization and MHAT, we provide the technical aspect of the service. We set the standards and we provide the systems to ensure delivery of good quality mental health care to the poorest sections of the population across 8 districts of Kerala and covering around 4,500 people. And it's long-term care for severe mental illness, provided free in conjunction with as many number of partners as we have the number of clinics to the most dispossessed people with severe mental illnesses. Prior to that, a third of my career was in the UK, in the National Health Service. And the first bit of my career was mostly at the Christian Medical College, Vellore. So that's briefly about me. Thank you.
Dr. Manoj, I forgot that with Dr. Desai, but I'll start that with maybe loop around to him. For our visually impaired friends, I was wondering if you could just describe your setting, what's behind you, the way you look right now, classes, colors, all of that.
Sorry, say that again.
For our visually impaired friends who are listening in, I'd just like you to give a brief perception of who you are right now and what's around you, just so that they get an idea.
Oh, the room where I'm now. Sorry, have we lost Sandhya?
Yes, it looks like.
Nimesh, what did she say?
Yeah, I wasn't too sure, but I thought what she said was that there are friends with us who might be visually impaired, and so you might just want to be sure that we are. Can we then carry on as we were advised by the organizers and request my good friend Dr. Samir Parekh from Delhi to briefly please introduce yourself, Samir? I'd love to do that, but I'll let you do that.
And with your permission, always. So I'm a psychiatrist, now practicing for over 2 decades. I represent the Fortis National Mental Health Program from Fortis Healthcare. In the private setup, we are one of its kind multi-city, multi-centric programs spread across several cities, over 20 hospitals, where we provide comprehensive mental health services. But over the years, and my own focus and my own passion, so as to say, is in preventive mental health, community mental health. We run one of the most established school mental health programs in the country. In fact, yesterday we announced the results of our annual psychology quiz, which had 15,000 children from school-going ages who took part from 1,200 schools of the country, and 280 cities took part.
That sounds wonderful. Sandhya is here?
A 24-hour helpline in 16 Indian languages, collectively run by our psychology team. So that's a bit of what we do, and representing Fortis Healthcare. As a private healthcare, we are committed into mental health and committed into creating awareness of mental health the best that we can. So.
Thanks, Samir. I don't know if Sandhya is here or if I should continue, but let's, Sandhya, please chip in if when you're connected back with us. Manoj, shall we say, the three of us, that we have about what, 7 to 8 or max 10 minutes initial remarks? That you're right? Sandhya, please.
Sorry, like I said, my internet is all over the place.
I was just asking Manoj to make his initial remarks. So
right.
Yes.
I'm going to quickly has Dr. Parekh introduced himself?
Yes.
In the 3 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so then I'll quickly take us through the framework of the panel for the benefit of those who are listening in. We're looking at mental health as disability, and we're looking at the challenges that face us currently, and eventually we want to look at what can people who are listening in, whether that's that's regular people like me who face challenges, whether that's policymakers, whether that's clinicians. We're looking at what can they take away so that the next 10 years going forward to begin with become easier on those who are providing mental health care and for those who are accessing. So if you'd like to go first, Dr. Parekh.
Right. It seems that I must again step in. Sorry about that, Sandhya. So Manoj and Samir, shall we do this? Each of us, if we have about, like I say, 7 to 8 minutes, max 10 minutes of the initial remarks on the line that Sandhya has said. Can I just say about ability as against disability, and about building mental health care solutions. Sandhya, if you don't mind, shall we go with Manoj first?
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thanks. Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. And do remind me if I go over time.
Sure.
Okay. So, the conversation during these 2 days is about ability and disability in this National Ability Summit. And the first thing I would like to say is that disability due to mental disorders has only been recently recognized as on par with disabilities due to other physical conditions. So for us working in the mental health field, that is a huge step forward. To be recognized as a group of people with disabilities, but of a mental kind, is a huge step forward. That opens up the door to, obviously, social benefits, social welfare schemes. It brings us to the forefront of society's concern for its own citizens. And therefore, that's a very welcome step forward. However, having said that, the implementation of it has been patchy. So one main suggestion from all of us working in the community, particularly among the dispossessed people, is that the benefits which should reach people with disabilities due to mental disorders are probably not reaching them in enough proportions, and a huge campaign, a huge effort is probably required to see that everyone with mental health related disabilities get the support that they should get. But the larger area of mental disorders and mental disabilities, we now know very well, for the last 20 years we have known that disabilities due to mental disorders cause a significant burden to societies across the world. We now have good statistics, such as in the disability adjusted life years. In other words, the morbidity aspect of mental health disorders, mental and neurological disorders, are well known. However, it seems to be the last frontier of stigma. Government investments are, especially in developing nations like ours, are pitifully small. The investment overall, not just from the government, but from us as society, as individuals, the emotional investment is very, very little. We need to mainstream discussions about mental health and the disabilities caused by mental disorders. It seems to be the last taboo, last stigma, where we dare not speak about mental health issues at all. As Sandhya said herself, I'm also someone who has suffered with mental disorders. And therefore, I bring to the table, I would like to say, not just the profession's viewpoint, but the viewpoint of a client or of a service user. And everywhere, mental health is neglected in schools. It's great to hear about Fortis's initiatives, but across the country, in schools, in colleges, in workplaces, the mental health of students, young adults, employees is hugely neglected. There needs to be a wakening up of that process. The other thing is that even when people try to access help, access is often inadequate, either because of distances, quite often because of distances, or because of economic concerns, because services seem to be concentrated in cities, necessitating a lot of travel. A lot of services are in the private sector, which makes it unaffordable to the huge majority of people. Families become impoverished because of their expenses on mental health, mental illnesses. And therefore, there is a big issue of access, of provision of social welfare, not only social welfare schemes, but good quality, comprehensive mental health care to large sections of the population. And that is difficult in the current model, where the delivery of services is based in institutions, amongst psychiatrists predominantly, and in cities. From that, it needs to move not just in terms of geography to communities, but also in terms of ownership. The ownership should move from psychiatrists or biomedically trained specialists to a larger multidisciplinary pool, as well as lay people, as well as the community. That shift can happen either if there is a demand from the bottoms up, from the grassroots up, or it is implemented from the top down. Implementation from the top down is difficult because as psychiatrists, as our representative organizations, as doctors, to be honest, we do not have any stakes in trying to change the status quo. We are happy as we are, delivering mental health services in the private sector or from the institutions. There's really no motive for us to change what is a comfortable way of life for us. I may be a bit provocative, but that is deliberate. So really, change needs to, I can see change happening only from the bottom up, because from top down, there's no motivation for change. And one way of making that happen is to spread initiatives which are different, which are based in the community and community owned, so that the awareness of such deliveries of mental health care becomes more common, leading to more demand for setting up such systems of care. So that's about 7 minutes, I think. Shall I pause now and give?
I was just going to hand it over to Dr. Desai, because I want him to come in at that point where you said psychiatrists are not willing to move from status quo, and that is extremely important because it's a massive criticism among service users as well, right? And it just seems like it constantly falls on deaf ears that, hey, why do you not want a different model, right? And people like me who are privileged enough to have the language and the authority to talk to a psychiatrist with some awareness, not as much as a doctor knows, but with some awareness. I know what my rights are, I know what I can ask, I can't ask. There are people who do not, who don't see themselves in any manner able or even worthy of asking questions of someone who's giving them treatment. So I'd like Dr. Desai to speak on that, about how do we get that shift to happen? A, we've got what, 4,000 odd, 5,000 odd psychiatrists in the country for a number that's massive. And B, how do we address that comfortable place where psychiatrists find themselves?
Okay, I kind of half sense that you're asking me to come in. I will. Okay. I was hoping for somebody to come in, but I will. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandhya. And I think I got the large gist of your stimulus point to me. But allow me to start with this. Generally, at meetings outside of the mainstream psychiatry or mental health, subjects on psychiatry or mental health tend to be the last in the list, be it medical congregations or be it disability congregations. Psychiatry and mental health, as I often joke, I don't mind being the dessert. I'm very glad that here we are the soup. Varija and team have been so progressive, as we see mental health guys, that in a 2-day summit, except for the first session and the second session in the morning, we are actually after the startups, we are the start. And so that's wonderful. I'm happy to be the soup also, soup or the dessert either. But really, jokes apart, I think that's wonderful that we are talking about mental health to start with in a 2-day summit on ability. The second point in that line is that it's wonderful the way the topic for this session has been framed. Building better mental health solutions. I think that actually gives a lot of direction already. And all of us, I did hear listening to the previous session, and I'm sure both the sessions will kind of provide some direction to that. My dilemmas or points to make are continuing from what Manoj said. In the larger field of disability, limited that one has learned and one is still learning, the paradigm is shifting from disability to ability as the summit shows. And I think that's wonderful. But in that context, the fact that Manoj highlighted so well, that the mental illness related disability is really been a recent recognition, and that also has been actually minimal. In policy and law and on paper, there's been a fair bit, but in ground reality, in a large country like this, it's been very minimal. And so how are we going to, in this initial phase of doing advocacy for mental illness related disability, make sure that we shift the paradigm from disability to ability of those persons who traditionally might be seen as disabled because of mental illness. So the challenge, I think, for all of us, not only in this session, but for next few years, if not 1 or 2 decades, and God willing for all 3 of you, my colleagues, much longer, many more decades than I see, for myself. But that's my first flag. The second is that I'm sure we'll all agree that the epidemic, the current pandemic or the epidemic, has actually provided a wonderful opportunity. There's been so much more talk about mental health of various shades: psychiatry, mental health, psychological distress, behavior of people, and how that affects health of the communities, responsible behavior, and everything, the full range. And so while it's been a huge challenge, it's also a great opportunity for which, again, the timing of this summit is very good, especially for disability at large, certainly for mental health and disability interface. My concern, I must say, friends like Samir and, I mean, it's really good that Samir and Manoj and I come from such diverse settings. In addition to Sandhya's own experiential lived-in experience and expertise, three of us professionals in health and mental health come from such diverse settings. Much as I have greatest respect for friends in the corporate and private sector who provide good quality services with communitization, my heart and soul does seem to bleed as much as anyone of yours does for the underprivileged and the really disadvantaged, the underbelly of the society. And so a lot of work that I've been individually involved with NGOs, and I've got IBAS, my organization, to get involved in, is with the homeless populations at large, the urban homeless, and especially the urban homeless mentally ill. There, frankly, the issue of mental illness-related disability has not even scratched the surface. There, the mere issue is of minimal dignity of life. The Article 21 that Supreme Court redefined as not only right to life, but life with dignity, even that has virtually not happened. For about 4 to 5 lakh, conservative estimates, for about 4 to 5 lakh homeless mentally ill people in this country, including some 25, if not more, 25,000 homeless mentally ill people on the streets of Delhi. Both the issues have hardly begun to occur. Dignity of life or mental health access, forget mental health related disability or the benefits or the positive affirmative action of mental illness related disability. What is nice at the same time is that the organizations, one or two, especially one that I'm involved with for 20 years, in line with what some of you shared, is actually an organization which is, except for 2 or 3 core staff who are professionals from different backgrounds, a large part of the workforce is people who were homeless and who are now getting rehabilitated as workers of the organization, including homeless mentally ill people who are recovered and now working. So that's an unbelievably different experience as compared to the routine hospital work that I do day in, day out. And that
Dr. Desai, I'm going to just cut in here because this is an important bit. Right. So when we're talking about mental health in terms of a disability, right, and then we're talking about recovery, right, that complicates policy, right? Now, if I were to sort of, and here I'm taking a very generic example, someone in a wheelchair resigned for the rest of their life if they're going to be in a wheelchair, has no scope for getting out of a wheelchair at some point and resuming normal life. Whereas someone with a mental health issue who could avail benefits, right, there might be a possibility of at least managing, if not a full-fledged life, at least managing a productive, fairly decent life going forward, right? So how does that, like, do policies that we have today for the mentally ill, does it take into consideration what recovery means, and do we need to redefine recovery?
Very much. Thanks. For us clinicians and professionals, recovery unfortunately had been a fairly ill-focused binary concept. And we all know now that recovery is a journey and a process and a whole spectrum rather than yes or no, or present or absent, which is also my discomfort with the whole issue of quantifying and benchmarking disability at 40 plus or 40 less or more, especially for all psychosocial disabilities, not only mental illness related, all psychosocial disabilities at least. The whole issue of that recovery pattern that you are talking about is very crucial. And how does policy and program or the schemes take that into account and say help people towards empowerment, independent existence, the Article 19 of UNCRPD, and yet in that process of 5 years provide graded support for him or her to be able to do so. That's really thank you. But to address the question that you stimulated me with, Sandhya, I really think, and I really do believe this. I don't know how many of us here know, the larger audience group also, that the US of A, with about 1/4 the population, has about 10 times the number of psychiatrists than we have. And double the number of psychiatrists. We are about 5,000. They are about, yes, Amit.
But how many psychiatrists in US of Indian origin?
Right. But my major point is, I think we have beaten this horse quite a bit. While the government of India and all of the society needs to build mental health human resource more, absolutely no doubt about that, I think we need to start depending on non-psychiatry, including non-mental health professional resource for one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum will require professional expertise for sure. But really, we need to stop lamenting this so much and build on the resources, not only for the negative reason that we are less in number, for the positive reason that the other professionals and paraprofessionals will actually deliver more effective, less stigmatized, and more accessible service. The access issue that Manoj flagged so well. So I will not about funds. Allow me that for a minute. Very quickly, I went on an NHRC visit to one of the traditional mental hospitals in Bengal. I won't name the place. It took me back in life 60 or 70 years. I almost thought I was traveling in a time machine. And there were 9 full-time qualified psychiatrists employed by the state government employed there. So it's not always the lack of professionals that brings issues or even funds. Funds in that hospital was not really so meager. There were 9 qualified psychiatrists, and yet it was heart-wrenching to see that hospital just a year ago. My last 2 minutes, if I might, Sandhya, building better mental health solutions. To me, it seems if I were to create a dual table, traditionally the mental health solutions the world over, and unfortunately in our society more, have been monolithic, power-based. They need to change from there. My bullet number 1. 2, they have been top-down, as Manoj said. They need to be both top-down and bottom-up simultaneously. 3, they have been very didactic and hierarchical. They need to become more participatory. 4th, it's been very exclusionary, us and them. Not just the mental health service providers, but society's attitude. We need to make it into inclusive, as we all agree. It's been very stigmatizing. We need to make it at least less stigmatizing, if not eliminate that. I will stop there. I guess 8 or 9 minutes, Sandhya. I hope she is with us. Sandhya, are you? Right.
I am. Just glitched out for a bit, but I'm back. Thanks so much for that, Dr. I'm going to quickly go to Dr. Parekh now and have his, I really think his perspective on working in communities is going to be valuable, because he works with a very systematic program with Fortis that deals with regular people who can afford private care, but also outreach programs. And I think this is an important sort of that kind of experience gives one perspective on how to take forward the idea of reshaping the structure of caregiving and healthcare provisions the way it is today in India. Dr. Parekh, I'll leave that with you.
I fundamentally believe that anything which is not implementable is a waste of time, right? Most intellectual conversations put me off within a few seconds, because blackboards don't have meaning, unless there is an implementation happening. I believe that there is so much to do, so little time, virtually no focus. That's the reality. And then that to be able to find who has more role, who has more layers, who's fair, who's unfair, is the personification of stupidity at levels which is unimaginable. A country that has 800% shortage of experts needs experts. Let's not take it away from that. But at the same time, if we do not simultaneously focus on empowering the key of our culture, our background, which is interdependence, communities, family systems, the robust pillars on which we've always managed to look at almost any problems in life, including mental illness. It's the integrated family, integrated society that a few hundred years back was able to integrate people with mental ailments a lot better than what we are able to do now. Because that's where we've lost touch with who we have been. I fundamentally believe that life skills and skills for life need to be a part of our entire educational system. Now that educational system can range from schools, college, medical colleges for that matter. And until we simultaneously do empower with education and skills, work in community, and all of this can happen only if we destigmatize mental health. If our conversations continue to be stigmatized, if slurs and negative comments continue to be a part of our narrative, if influencers are irresponsible, if portrayal of mental health in media is irresponsible, you can't say that creative freedom allows you to increase stigma. Right? Let's not confuse between these aspects. Even today, no matter what we say, and Dr. Desai was spot on, that one's heart goes out to people who are at level where neither accessibility nor awareness, and so much stigma that even basic dignity is a question. But working in urban cities, I can see the stigma affecting as much. You could be a school kid hesitant to talk to a teacher, forget a counselor. You may be an employee in an organization that has the best vision, mission statements on paper, but you may not be able to tell your employer that, hey, I had an anxiety episode and I need to stay home for 2 days. But that's the reality. We don't have corporate India focusing on mental health outcomes. We do not have sustained focus of media on mental health. It's still sporadic. And yes, Dr. Desai was right that COVID has brought a lot more into perspective. We talk about life skills and mental health curriculums sparingly. We are still conversing about them. We should have made and implemented them. Right? We talk about giving skills to more people. Start doing it. Deficit is there. Prevalence is there, problem is there. So if we don't focus on the doing bit, it doesn't matter, does it? It just doesn't matter. In fact, I believe various forms of partnerships of all stakeholders, be it public-private, in any case, a large part of mental health experts are in private sector, and I believe there needs to be an integration where whether it's a district integration, a town integration, we just need to figure it out and simultaneously increase seats, increase colleges, increase education at various levels, go at basic levels. And remember, all around this is the pillar of relationships, right? I've seen so much in the last 8-9 months, unprecedented. It's just been an education in psychology, then one would have never got in probably years and years of contemporary, proper, conventional education. And to me, the difference between people who come out of COVID positively and not is the support system. people who continue to behave responsibly vis-a-vis who did not, was the right kind of support system and right kind of peers and right kind of family around them. So we need to strengthen that. Recognize the power of our roots, our culture, our strength. Empower more people by education, media, influencers, role models.
Dr. Parekh, I'm just going to cut in here. Sorry, because just paucity of time. I'm going to bring Dr. Manoj back in here to what you have said in terms of partnerships. How do we do partnerships? So you started your piece by saying that what is not implementable, there's no point in talking about it. So how do we start partnerships? How do we go to communities without having a certain guideline, without having a certain vision? I'll have Dr. Manoj address that as a counterpoint to what you have been saying.
Yeah, I think it's much more complex than that, in the sense that there's no one model which fits all. First of all what all of us can do is only to focus on what we can do. And that may be, different aspects of mental health. Secondly, you can't just go into community and expect people to, facilitate this shift of power, which both the other speakers have mentioned. All of these need to go hand in hand. One of the things I've learned in the last 10 to 12 years is the power of knowledge. Democratization of professional knowledge is very helpful. So we run courses where we provide training for people without any professional background in specific aspects of mental health care. It may be to assess a person, it may be to run rehab services, it may be to provide vocational training, it may be to provide family therapy, whatever. Specific training to fit specific roles, and it has been very humbling. What took me people with appropriate training and motivation, and that the good thing is that volunteers are usually high in motivation, and people develop these bits of knowledge provided you are willing to let go of the hold on knowledge and make it democratic. So people learn fast with support and continuous supervision. People use the knowledge very well and the skills they have learned, and they continue to learn and improve over a period of time. So while we increase the number of professionals and while we wait to do that, as Dr. Desai pointed out, we have a huge, let's focus on the abilities. We have a huge number of people, well motivated, happy to be trained, and provided there is the right kind of path for them. Let's use them. Let's train people. The role of psychiatrists will change slightly, and it is no less of a role. My role from seeing people at the front line and prescribing medications has changed to working with others, working through others. It doesn't, 60% or 80% of people coming to our outpatient clinics do not require a psychiatrist with 30 or 40 years of experience to see them. I'm sure in IBHAS and other places, it's the juniors who see most of the patients, and our role as seniors is to supervise them. Except in the private sector, where we still end up doing the frontline job, most of it, not in large institutions, but mostly around the country in small practices. So we need to accept the fact that our roles need to change. We as psychiatrists.
Yeah. So Dr. Manoj, I'm going to quickly go to Dr. Desai here, because that's interesting. That's important also, that as psychiatrists, roles need to change, and the way service users connect, the way the way psychiatrists influence policy, that needs to also, I think, see a shift. Dr. Desai, quickly, I think we've got about 10 minutes, no questions yet, but I'd like for you to focus on the idea of couple of things. One is the new bunch of psychiatrists, right? So how do we train more people? Do we need how many psychiatrists do we need? I mean, not in terms of numbers, but how are we going to get there? And is that part of the conversation where policy is concerned? And this is my personal issue with a lot of conversations around policy, is that there's a lot of ideation, and then when you actually come to put it down to paper, you realize the challenges that present themselves. So what does it look like in terms of how do you train more psychiatrists? How do you encourage more psychiatrists, more young people to join or to take up psychiatry as a career? Because the numbers don't make sense, and I'm wondering why that is. Why is there 5,000 psychiatrists when there are thousands of so many other disciplines, right? And the second part of that question is also shifting a little away from the central topic of what we've been talking for the past 45 minutes to also include neuro disorders in the mental health segment, right? Not just in terms of stuff that not in terms of your depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, because it's a completely different aspect, but neuro disorders. How do we talk about that, and what does it look like going forward for
right? Thank you, Sandhya. If I got that right, the two questions that you have. How do you get more psychiatrists to be involved in work outside the clinic or the hospital? That's a fascinating question. Some years ago, I wrote a piece in one of the society presidential addresses about responsibilities of psychiatrists. And some years later, I went on to enlarge that to say responsibility of mental health professionals. And I kind of divided that into must, should, and can. And I would really think that the first duty of psychiatrists and mental health professionals, of course, is to be competent and ethical at what they do. As a should, second level, if you or more than few of us, or if many of us would get involved in work outside the clinic or hospital, actually community-based work or communitization of the hospital services, that'll be great. I don't know, this is true for also medicine and public health, if you realize. There is this dilemma there too. Hospital-based medicine and community medicine or community health. I don't know if there is a better answer, but sure, in the medical education and the postgraduate education of psychiatrists, if there was a little more community orientation and public health orientation, that would help more people to go the way Manoj and Samir have gone. And I have tried, But this goes back to Bohr Committee. 1946, Joseph Bohr tried saying this. It's not happened in medicine too much or in psychiatry. The second part, do remind me, what was your question, Sandhya? You had a second part to the question. Manoj or Samir, do you have any sense?
She'd asked you about neuro.
Pardon me?
She'd asked you about neurological illnesses.
Neurological disorders.
Thank you. Thank you. At both ends of the lifespan, especially children and young people and elderly, what may be called as neuropsychiatry, or what in early stages be called neurodevelopmental disorders, especially in the context of disability. Indeed, so much so that I'll take the liberty of saying that in the last 2 weeks, I've had a few chats with Varija to say, look, we need to talk about beyond mental illness related disability to larger issues of neurodevelopmental disabilities. Mental illness, intellectual impairment, autism, dyslexia, the full range. And I would really plan a session 1 day or 2 day entirely on disability matters or ability issues for the range of neurodevelopmental disorders, because all of them kind of get a short shrift and get neglected. I won't say more on this very quickly. There is politics, big P as well as small p, even within the disability sector. And so the mental illness or psychosocial disability kind of gets, as I think Manoj initially hinted, we got recognition very late. So that's an important issue, certainly for the elderly. Dementia, Parkinson, other degenerative disorders, Again, that's nobody's baby, especially when it comes to social issues of disability. I hope I answered that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Desai. Quickly, Dr. Parekh, coming back to you because you have such a strong view on this. What does it mean now that mental health is, and I'm putting this as honestly as I can without being too terrible sounding. Mental health is a sunrise industry today. It is a fashionable industry today. What does it look like then for us to go forward and not just work ethically, but to actually just get care across? And because you've worked across,
I don't think it's a fashionable industry. I don't quite like the adjective fashionable to be put with mental health. I don't think that's true. I think it's far away from the reality. Just because almost anybody and everybody in today's time can end up speaking about something that does not make it trendy or in sync, and you might be trending on a certain platform of social media, but that doesn't really matter because 90% of there might actually not be factually correct. I don't think there's anything trendy. I don't think there's anything fashion. I certainly don't even see it as a sunrise or anything like that. And I'm certainly not even remotely close to being an industry.
I'll cut in there only to make a point that there have been more, psychology is an unregulated area, but I am going there. There are more therapists than we've ever seen in the last, say, about 4 years. There are more organizations that focus on mental health. CSR contribution towards mental health and organizations that focus on mental health has been higher than ever before.
Which is data for any other branch as well. I mean, every few years for any branch, you can pick up any branch in the world, and the data will only be increasing because that's how it is. The whatever is coming to mental health right now is still it's a drop in the ocean. Let's not give value to a drop in the ocean. The drop has no meaning. You know, even if we'll end up putting in a few buckets, we'll make a bit of a well out of it. But these droplets and thinking that these droplets are trends, not really. Yes, change is happening, but change is too less, too slow, already too late.
That's the question that I was picking up. So how does that change? How does that change without waiting for the next generation of psychiatrists, which takes, 7 years for you to be qualified enough to treat someone? How do you wait for that one batch or one bunch of people to pick up? So where does that leave us?
The batch part, I will let Dr. Desai answer. I think he's better placed than anybody else. But like I said, conversations, genuine, sincere, empathetic, responsible social narrative, media, government and the non-government sector, private and the public sector, corporate India, everybody put in consistent effort, and not on one off day here and one off day there. For the next 2 decades, probably we'll be able to make a difference. That's the reality of mental health in our country.
I'll quickly say 2 things. Sorry, Manoj first, please.
No, please.
No, sir, Manoj, please.
No, I was just wanted to point out one significant kind of COVID-induced change in the way we work, which is that psychiatry, which used to be the kind of, you couldn't imagine practicing psychiatry without face-to-face contact across the table. That has changed significantly, so that both clients as well as professionals are now quite happy to connect through video technology, and it seems to be very effective. We almost overnight changed to a remote way of working with very little loss in fidelity. So I just wanted to point out that the way we work is also changing. And to one of the answers to the problems of access, to the lack of professionals, is the use of technology. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with. Sorry, can I, Sandhya? Sure. I agree with what Manoj said, but I also want to say that what Samir said earlier about too little, too late, I completely agree with. Spot on. Especially when it comes to the corporate sector. Can I also say that I also happen to work with the state mental health authority in Delhi besides the national government, and in Delhi for the last 10 or 15 years we have actually tried partnership across public government sector, private sector, and the NGOs, and it's a reasonably good working relationship that we have, and yet we have not succeeded in getting any CSR or corporate support. With all the togetherness of private, NGO and government sector in Delhi under the banner of SMHA, our work on homeless for health or mental health, virtually no CSR. Maybe I'm not a good salesperson.
No, but this is the complaint across the board. I mean, if you've, there are a couple of institutions that we constantly go back to. The Banyan, for instance, the Banyan in Chennai has had to work for several years before, corporate adopted them and started to build. But it's a massive challenge.
Yeah.
But unless that happens, and here I tend to agree with Dr. Parekh as well. It's been my biggest bugbear that newspapers and TV not only misrepresent mental health reporting and do a very bad job of reporting mental health and mental health issues, including the Act a couple of years ago. I had the debate over it, but also focus. They don't have a person on that beat. I mean, in a country where there are so many ill people, Deepika Padukone gets a spotlight, but there are tons of others who don't have the access, and that never gets talked about. There are the stories there. So there, in fact, unless the media picks up its socks, I don't think it's going to, too much is going to happen there. But I think unless any of you have any closing comments, I think we've had a, yes.
I quickly want to recall Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement and say we shall overcome.
Yes. I mean, that's always the hope. Dr. Manoj, Dr. Parekh, if there's anything else you'd like to say, you can pick it up from there. But otherwise, I think we've had a really interesting session. Something that I thought it would be a quieter session, but it's been a really interesting one. And lots to take away from me. Lots of questions left out there. There's a little memento on behalf of the organizers, a digital memento. I think that should show up on the screen sometime now. But otherwise, thank you, sirs. It was really lovely talking to you.